Ceremonies, Nathan Cassar.
Well, welcome to the Justice Plan TV and podcast show, where we bring the wedding experts to your home to provide you with insider tips and knowledge to help make your special day go just as planned. Now, I'm your host and professional wedding MC, Nathan Cassar, and in this episode, I am so excited to introduce you to Glenn Millanta, also known as Sydney Celebrant Glenn, who is a fantastic and dynamic celebrant MC. Now, you may recognize this fantastic gentleman as the celebrant who married Nasser and Gabrielle in 2019 on season 5 of Channel 9's Married at First Sight. I really want to talk more about that. But he's much more than just a TV personality. He's a lot more. He's an actor, he's a presenter, he's a model. I have to probably make a policy that all of my future people don't look as good as me or better than me. Ex-radio announcer and copywriter, and these skills have helped him craft memorable ceremonies and perform them so that they're anything but boring. Now, but that's not all. Glenn also has a substantial online following for some of his awful, yet oddly addictive, his words, cheesy content creation. He collects vinyl records, is a movie buff, and enjoys a nice gin and far too many sweets. I'd say that is perfect for being in the wedding industry. Now today, Glenn will be sharing his expert insights on finding and choosing the right celebrant, what couples need to do legally to prepare to marry, and the cost of a celebrant and what you're paying for. Glenn is also a big advocate for encouraging couples to get creative and do their wedding their way. Now, in case you're already wondering what he's about to say, there is no right or wrong and nothing is off limits. And of course, Glenn is always here to bring a sense of fun to a couple's wedding. So we'll be talking about how he injects that very sense of joy into every ceremony he officiates. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn from the one and only Sydney Celebrant Glenn. Glenn, welcome.
Well, thank you. I honestly, I felt like that was a eulogy for...
What? You're not dying?
Maybe my funeral or this is your live segment. I've never had anyone build me up in such a way. I'm impressed.
Stop.
You've done your research.
No way. Are you kidding me? I think
It's amazing. Thank you.
I think you have me on there as if you haven't been built up like that before. You wrote half of that, so...
Look, I feel like that was a copywriter. And whilst I have experience in copywriting, I don't think I wrote half that, no. But I'm very impressed that you've done your research. Thank you very much, Mr. Cassar.
Of course, I absolutely have done my research. And of course, we've had the pleasure of working together before, and we were just talking before we started the show about how we've both commented to one another in the past that we are very similar in our approach, particularly when it comes to our on-stage craft. So as though I'm not a celebrant and you are, we share a lot of fundamentals when it comes to engaging a crowd. But before we get into your talking points, I really, like I said, I want to go back to that. I know you probably get talked about this all the time, but you said that what I was most curious about your Married at First Sight sort of spot was that you said it was your very first wedding. How did that work?
It was actually. So I became registered as a civil marriage celebrant in 2017, and I was in the process of building a website, creating social pages. And my mother-in-law actually at the time was at a party chatting to, I think, a friend's child's boyfriend who just by chance happened to be a producer on Married at First Sight. And she mentioned at the time that her son-in-law was a marriage celebrant as well as an MC and had a background in media. And he was interested and said, get him to send me through some material, which I did. And then we had a quick phone chat. He asked me to send some photos of me in a suit, send some photos of what I would use on the day, and write a script, which I did, and then I got booked. And ironically, not only was it my first ever, well, actually, it wasn't my first ever because during training to become a marriage celebrant, we had to perform ceremonies, but it was my first one that wasn't, this is really hard to explain because it was a fake wedding. We all know maths out there, fake weddings. But it was my first
you've just
one.
Broken some hearts out there.
I know, I'm sorry. But it felt like it wasn't a fake wedding the first time I ever did maths. I actually did maths twice, but the first time I did it for Nasser and Gabrielle's wedding, there was this really lovely feeling that this was real because the way we shot that first wedding was that we shot it from start to finish, with no stops for sound, with no production notes along the way. Things did change then, the second time I did it. And now I see, whenever I see maths, it's kind of cut up the ceremony in particular to a near, almost near its death. Like there is no structure of that ceremony anymore. Which
Yeah.
is part of my issue personally, if I'm completely honest about maths these days. I used to watch it because I love the ceremony and I love
Yeah.
seeing the exploration of couples and their initial thoughts and hopeful attractions of each other. But then seeing that relationship play out. And I really got that sense with Nasser and Gabrielle. I actually thought, this is really funny, and Gabrielle and Nasser will probably hate me for saying this, but I left that wedding and I remember feeling like they were the real deal. And one day I was going to be their real celebrant and marry them. Now, I
But no
could not
way.
have been more wrong.
I must admit, I didn't watch your season. In 2017, I was in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on cruise ships. But it's I'm. Do you still talk to them at all? Like, do you still keep in contact
I
with them? Or?
do. I actually caught up with
Oh,
NASA
great.
at an event the other night, an event for a new or a second season actually of a TV program called Love Me.
Oh.
So I caught up with him on the red carpet. We had a bit of a chat. And Gabrielle is a good mate of mine, and we chat often. Gabrielle has now become a marriage celebrant herself. I've
Oh,
coached her through that.
stop! Really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Wow,
she's
that's
now a
cool.
marriage celebrant in her own right. Your Love Story by Gabrielle.
Okay.
She can be found if anyone is interested in finding her, an ex-maths expat. Not that I'm sending business away from me, but she's
That is
equally as
such an
fantastic.
interesting, like, little hook, right? Like, I love that. Okay, all right.
Yeah, but the other thing I was going to say was, ironically, that the first wedding, not only was maths my first kind of big wedding, but it was actually on my birthday.
Oh,
So I gave up my
that's
birthday.
amazing.
I married at first sight.
A fake wedding on your birthday. I love it.
Fake wedding on my
That's
birthday. And then
you
the
can't
second
write
year,
that.
the second time that I did it, it was
Yeah.
also on my birthday.
Oh, stop. That's
I'm like, what's this
amazing.
about?
Well, happy birthday when your birthday comes around again. Let's
Oh,
talk
no.
about real weddings for a second because I know we just spent a bit of time talking about fake weddings.
Mm,
Let's talk about the real ones that you do
mhm.
because you do a lot of real weddings a year and you're very good at what you do. How do
Oh, thank you.
people find and choose the one that really vibes for them? What would you say is what really goes in people's minds when they say, this is how I do it, and this is the person for me?
Yeah. Look, it is the $1 million question, if I'm honest. And it's one that we feel like we're kind of vetted in some ways, but at the same time, when I'm speaking to couples, I want to make sure that we're the right fit. I think the answer to life, and now that I'm in my 40s, people who ask me this, I'll always say the answer to life is connection. It's being connected to people. It's being connected to your craft or what it is that you do, your purpose. Your purpose is ultimately what kind of drives us all, connected to whatever you're so interested in. And I think when it comes to choosing this element, it's got to be someone that you feel connected to, somebody that you feel comfortable with, somebody who you feel that ultimately can bring you out in a ceremony and perform that ceremony so beautifully and in the way that you want it, which can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. The industry has changed quite a lot, even in the time that I've been a marriage celebrant. It used to be largely performed by, older men or women, and I'm certainly not ageist by any means. Some of the older celebrants that I know are absolutely sensational, and I'm big fans of what they do. But it's also introduced, seen the introduction of a lot of younger, vibey celebrants.
Yeah.
Now, I I, I guess my style when people ask me is, and for anybody that's considering me, what is my style?
Yeah.
What you see is kind of what you get. I'm a big
Mm.
fan. I'm a bit of a gushy romantic, if I'm honest.
I know. I've
So
listened to your ceremonies before. You are a ham, and I love it.
I'm a bit of a ham. I do like structure to a ceremony.
Of
I
course.
do like keeping some of the traditionality to a ceremony. I think for me that's important. So whilst I do know there are other celebrants who won't do things like the asking, they just don't see it as something that we need to do. Now the asking is when you'll say, Nathan, do you come here today of your own free will to take
Ah.
um, Natalie Portman to be your lawful wedded wife? And of course you'll say, I do. Now, that is not a legal requirement. But for me, I just think
Mm.
that part when a couple says I do is kind of synonymous with a wedding. So I
Yes.
like to keep some of the tradition in, and I keep largely a traditional structure to what I do.
Mm.
Um, but I then infuse some of the little fun elements if couples are up for it.
Yeah.
Um, and one example of that, it's probably less fun, but more making it personal for the customer, is really crafting their story, and
Mm.
not in its fairy tale form. It's not Disney unless the couple is, they're Disney fans and that's the way they want their story told.
Yeah.
But it has to be real and authentic. I think when you're telling the couple's story, I have a set of questions that I ask my couples to understand them, to understand how they met, who made the first move,
Mm.
what first attracted them to each other, what they love about each other, what things they have in common, what irks them about each other. Like, I want to know everything. I'm a bit nosy like that. Now, when I find I learn all of that, then I kind of consider, what do I think is the bedrock of their story? What is the
Mm.
foundation of their story that really makes this couple work so well? And how do I bring that out in a ceremony? How do we celebrate that in their ceremony? So then I kind of craft the ceremony largely around their story, but then
Mm.
I add in some of the traditional elements because I think it makes it feel like a wedding. But then if they're up for it, again, I'll add in some fun because I think what that tends to do is relax the couple. And
I
I
love
mean,
that. Yeah.
this is not, it's not relaxing. Let's face it, standing there in front of
Well,
people,
no.
it's, it's nerve-wracking for people.
True, true, absolutely. And I think it's great that you're giving people that option because, as you know, there's like almost 10,000 celebrants in Australia now. It's creeping up to that number very, very quickly. And
Damn
so
them.
and so like there's a lot. Like you type in Google, like you're gonna find so many, and
Yeah.
it is one of the most overwhelming things that couples can go through.
Yeah.
So it's I think the best what you're to sort of distill what you're saying there is basically is that the best of you are able to say, here I am, this is what I'm about, and then couples then have the responsibility to be like, does that work for me, or do I need something a lot more zany? Do I need, do I want someone who's willing to dress up in a costume, or do I want somebody who is just purely great at those legos only in the courthouse, just get things over and done with kind of style? And that's totally fine. Like I think, but I love that there is that option there that is expanded in the last, say 10 or so years in the industry. So speaking of sort of away from like all the flowery, it's like beautiful stuff that obviously the copy, so to speak, that has to go into the wedding. Let's talk legals for a second. Sounds a little boring, but very important, obviously. What are the main fundamentals of the legal requirements for a couple when it comes to getting married?
For anyone wanting to marry, what you need to start with is the notice of intended marriage, which is a form that we refer to as the NOIM, the acronym, and that needs to be completed and signed by an authorised witness anytime 18 months out from a wedding, and lodged with a celebrant anytime 18 months out, but no later than 1 month before the solemnisation of that marriage.
Rightio.
That's the first thing. That's really important. And no matter how many times I've said this in the past, you'll occasionally get a couple that maybe aren't as well planned or as structured or as disciplined with their planning, who will sometimes let that slip. Now, what happens if that does slip is they
Okay.
then need to apply for a shortening of time